Okay, we're going to look into this BBC or UK presentation of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and I. We're just going to do the Akhenaten part here in part one. I want to show you what people are being told and directions of thought and versus what I might think.
While previous pharaohs were depicted as being physically perfect, Akhenaten instructed the royal artisans to picture him more realistically. Instead of looking like a warrior, his statues portrayed him as feminine.
I wouldn't say that they projected him as being feminine. I would say that it more projected him as being realistic, perhaps. It showed that he had a little bit of a beer belly, if you will, and perhaps he had somewhat of an elongated horse face, if you will, and it showed such. It also showed still a stylized view, though, that is incorrect. I mean, nobody's head really fits into that, and people have said, oh, he's an alien and stuff, but let's be realistic here. This isn't realistic either, and these little kids here have these elongated heads and look like little ant kids and stuff, and he's fixing to tell you about how in the art they show that they show a lot of affection and things like that that wasn't shown before. And yeah, kings, which are of course not before here, were actually representations of gods, and they don't have little kids clinging all over them and things like that. And it went down from there. That type of ideology, I guess, was taken all the way through the great kings of Europe and things like that, to where there were a lot of nannies and things that were involved with it. Daddy was far too busy in quite some cases, and it left for, even in the most noble of families, some type of lonely childhood sometimes, but usually not. Very much more entertained than most other children, but then again, an entertaining or a lonely childhood is from within and from what you have and what you feel about it, and not necessarily about materialistic issues. Let's go on.
And he was seen being tender with his children or in poses with Nefertiti that would have seemed far too intimate just a few years before.
Perhaps.
Akhenaten and Nefertiti ruled together for 12 years, and then, curiously, there is no record of the queen after that. The disappearance of Nefertiti is one of the great mysteries of Akhenaten's reign. After being such an integral part of her husband's kingship, almost a co-regent, suddenly there are no more mentions or depictions of her to be found.
Look at this statue here. There's been a lot said about it. Here it is in a blazing full light. Usually it's kept under subdued light, and a picture is taken of it. Her other eye is missing. What would have been her left eye, or when we're looking at it, the right side was missing, but the other one still has the alabaster inlay and the blue-greenish hazel eye that you can see laid into it, and her pale skin. Sure, it's quite scuffed, but you can tell the lady didn't go around with mud on her face, what looks like here, but they feared trying to clean it anymore would just eat into it and take off a lot of the paints that are on it and things like that. You can see where her ears chipped off and what white or it looks like and stuff in plaster. And quite a masterpiece and a beautiful thing. And indeed, Nefertiti actually means beauty has come to us, and there's been a lot said about the Amarna women trading and things that went on in certain times, and where she had indeed gone and what had happened to her. He's going to relay a couple of ideas to you.
Reasons for this are still in debate. Some believe she may have died during childbirth. At one time, it was believed she was indiscreet in some way, and Akhenaten disposed of her.
Perhaps choked her.
Still, others suggest that she lived on past Akhenaten's interest in the sun.
I misspoke. Perhaps had her choked or disposed of in some way, kind of like he alluded to. Of course, he didn't grab her around the throat, but who knows, actually. But let's continue.
Nefertiti could have, in fact, been the more devout of the two, and cloistered herself away to remain loyal to the cult of the Aten.
There are people that do say that she may have actually been banished away from there, and that her children were indeed banished away from there, Scotia actually being one of them, and that she was taken in as a queen in Scotland and so on, and led to an ancient folklore that they have to this day about such. And but there's a lot of oddities with this too, and then who she ends up becoming. For a while it seems she was a pharaoh. I know for a fact there's a ship depiction of a fight where she is depicted and said to be in it and fighting as a warrior, and you're like, well, only pharaohs would be depicted that, whether they were at the fight or not. And so it almost seems that she had taken over during that in-between time. And of course, she was the regent before Tut came in and so on. But let's go on.
The basic situation seems to be that she actually died, and there is evidence that she was buried in the royal tomb at Amarna, in what is called the royal wadi, beyond the confines of the royal city.
So in the necropolis area, but the one that was separated off from the temples, they have a huge necropolis area that's near there. And the interesting thing about it being this way back, with people trying to say that, oh, there weren't Caucasian looking people there or something along that line, is that the cemetery there, as they're excavating it, over 1 million bodies so far gone into. And it seems odd, but in one area are a large contingent of redheads all together. In one area there's a bunch of blonde heads all together, and then brown and black haired people are all in one area too. And it doesn't seem like it's logical, because even red-headed people have other-headed children. I mean, even the Irish and people like that, there's nobody that's redhead. It just doesn't seem quite right. But they show to be separated, and of course there's other effigies that are along with them talking about Set and Ramses and so on. And then you find that Seti and Ramses were both redheads, it seemed. And so there's a connection. In fact, upcoming, he's going to show you a very telling picture from a tomb that we're going to look at. But I guess I kept this at a wrong spot. But you can see his little bill belly and how it sticks over, right? Now, one could say many things about this. Now, as he said, everybody else was stylized before then. Everything was made to look just perfect. You can see that in the Greeks too, where their statues are made to look like Adonis, with different heads stuck on them, as being the guys, or some type of Arnold Schwarzenegger looking type thing. And you know that these people probably didn't look like this, although the gods were shown to be in perfection. And because these Egyptians were said to be God's representative, they were supposed to be done as per perfection. Whereas at certain times in history, we definitely know that people showing heaviness are showing their ability to not go through famine, to actually show that they are fat. In fact, an edict for women to have actually been very heavy through a lot of our ancient archaic times, whenever she is a mother, showing that she is capable, that she isn't going to die if she just gets sick. She's not some skinny little waif. They show those as being a princess, but a woman is always shown as having larger features, if you will. And here we see his little tummy sticking over, and in fact even his little belt and sashing, the way it's done, is kind of pushed down under his belly, you know. I mean, to be honest and serious about it. So but back in the very earliest dynasty too, there was a hearkening to this, and it looked like he was just hearkening back to that. You know, there's a lot of the Egyptian diorama that they have of the gods that comes about much later, that they don't even really seem to be doing the cult of Osiris until about the 5th dynasty or so. There are all the other cults that come into it. It strengthens, it gets bigger, it becomes a huger pantheon. And then he seems to kind of ditch it back to an idea which seems to be Ra, although it is Aten, but it seems to be that same sun god Ra in situation. But just due to all that going on and the power that the priest has had, it was extremely he was the heretical king for sure, and still is looked at as that way now. And we don't even understand the reason why it may have been said that way, but people that get into it quite a bit find some reasoning. Let's continue.
In any case, Akenaten did not have to suffer from a lack of companionship. He appointed a new male co-ruler. His name was Smenkhara, and some believe he may have been the pharaoh's younger brother.
There's a lot of evidence that he is his younger brother, and this is one of the odd stylized pictures that you seem to see that's stranger than other ones too. For to me, even at first glance, the man seems oriental, And I know it really is in the depiction of the eyes, where they always line the eyes extra and put the inlay and stuff around them, even though this is just a brass-sized form. But it seems to have that depiction to it somewhat. And I think a lot of people have seen it over time. But yeah, regardless, he's supposed to be his brother. So he's his not-so-horse-faced brother and in co-regent. But watch what the man tries to say here next, which really, it really doesn't have any validity, and I'll try to go into it here.
It is possible that he married one or more of his daughters. If he did...
And you can see that she looks a lot like him, but not so horse-faced like Akenaten. Of course, she's more oval-faced, but you can see the variation in between. And this is Thai, and everybody said so much about her and so on, and some of the other depictions that show of her. But this is also perhaps that daughter that went to Scotland that had the red hair, which again we'll see coming up.
Did that would not actually be unusual for a pharaoh. But in the case of Akenaten, we also have a suggestion that he had a homosexual relationship with his co-ruler, Smenkhara, towards the end of his reign, which would make Akenaten one of the first bisexual people, presumably, since he also has children from Nefertiti.
It's strange that they would put that in there in a way, because so much other stuff shows that he was actually his brother. And so all of this love and things that they say they show through tablets was probably, and they go, no, this is stronger than what other people say. Well, yeah, they're actually brothers and co-rulers. Here's a special time this thing's going on, and another time that it was like, no, you don't want the president and vice president to be brothers and everything. I mean, that's not cool, or however you want to look at it. And of course, he tried to change everything radically, wanted to change the stylized art, wanted to change this, wanted to move the capital, wanted to do this, wanted to do that. And pretty soon these people were like, what, the hell is he doing? It seems like when you look back at it, and of course a lot of the power was taken away from the priests, they didn't like that crap at all. So let's continue though. Funny that he would try to mention him and pardon him off as that. And of course we know the Greeks had some homosexuality and things like that, and it's known that it was pretty much everywhere at one time or another in a lot of places. Frowned upon, of course, in Sodom and Gomorrah and all the types of things like that. But we're not going to pretend that it may not have happened here. In fact, what if he was found out to be a homosexual? Could that have been one of the deciding factors to say that he was a heretical type king, because a king was supposed to have done this passing on of lineages? Well, Akenaten, I think, had 8 or 9 kids. Somebody down in the comments correct me, but I think it's 8 or 9 kids that lived. And somebody said that he had a couple of other that didn't live through full thing, or maybe it was out of the 9 that a couple of them didn't live till maturity. But the man had kids, and so to pawn him off as a homosexual is something quite odd. But he might have been bisexual, but that could have been also a bunch of propaganda things too, right? It looks more like leaning that way, like they're going to smear his name one way or another. One thing incredibly telling is that on the extreme detailed list of Amarna kings, he's left off, and so is King Tut. And no one even really knew he existed till he showed up. When he showed up, they had to figure out who the hell he was and where it attached to. I'm serious, look back at it.
His unorthodox appearance and descent from the old religion caused history to label him a heretic. Still, there is little evidence that the pharaoh Akhenaten's new sun cult ever really took hold among ordinary people.
So we see all these pale Egyptian worshippers and mourners and things that are coming in a temple thing, and women, and it's vibrantly colored. And what's extremely telling here about these ancient Egyptians is that I see blonde and red-haired ones too. They appear to be carrying offerings a little bit different than the other do. Perhaps it is them and their temple duties that are set alone. Perhaps if a redhead or a blonde-haired shows up, they're dedicated to Set, and therefore that has something to do with other temple duties than other people do, and it's kind of rationalized that way through your life. And in fact, regardless of family, you're buried in that way. In fact, I read a whole dissertation about it not too long ago, but I don't seem to be able to get access to the paper to share it all with you, or at least some of the highlights out of it. But again, this is one of the pictures that I wanted to show back in blue-eyed, blonde pharaohs, or blue-eyed Egyptians, one of those series that I've done, and couldn't find the picture, but here it shows up in this one. It's almost one of the reasons why I picked this to do it in the first place, and because this is so long ago and back at the time of Akenaten, and exactly along with it, and you can see these people that go also with that burial ground that is separated. Now let's continue.
Excavations of the ancient city of Akenaten have revealed that even before his death, many of the inhabitants kept idols of the old gods in their homes. Were they ignoring the new religion, or did they sense the inevitable?
I think they continued on, much like we have still pagan aspects of all of our religion that are in there, including Christmas, Easter, and all kinds of things that really aren't attached to it, but if you go deep into it, they really were always attached to it, with a symbolical zodiacal thing and a rising and dying sun god. And I've tried to show through my videos that Proto-Indo-Europeans that seem to have heralded mankind coming out of the last ice age were sun worshippers, and that everybody really was in one way or another sun worshippers, and also the stars and the moon and things were deified in the sky, and as above so below, and too many things shown here, 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 and here, to tell you that people, oh, well, they met each other one time trading. And it's like, no, well, they've got cuneiform, and they've got cuneiform. Well, they found one of their tablets and made it up. No, that's not the way any of this goes. It's not the way that it went. And we're not going to look at it in an odd, lied way and stuff. Here he has the sun disk on top of his head. It's one of the statuettes they're showing. And was there still Ra worship and stuff? Yeah, they found during this exact period people still having Re attached to their names. All kinds of other gods still attached to their names. Tutankhamun was really Tutankhaten. And his father died. Perhaps they swayed him to change his name growing up, God knows what. But everybody had different names there. And there were periods of times when it went back and forth between two people's last names that, of course, are symbolic names that are given to them as being pharaohs, but are kings, really. Pharaoh just meant big house, and it's actually the giant island that's out there in the Alexandrian Gulf area. But let's go a little more on this.
Akenaten's religion was failing. Akenaten died in 1334 BC, during the 17th year of his reign, and with him died his religion, based on the worship of the sun disk. Soon after, there was a tremendous backlash against his religion and heresy, which led to the destruction of anything that bore his name.
And he pretty much got wiped out of history, but then people, here's the funny one, they're like, why is all this cool and this area right here wiped out? Why is this wiped out? And they found one where it went through it and didn't get wiped out, and they're like, who's this Akenaten guy? And then you come to find all these things, and his statues look like physically somebody beat the hell out of that. Physically. Not just the broken nose that people see on a lot of stuff, but it looks like somebody setting through this thing around and was pissed off at it a little bit. And what happened with all these things. And so it really did a key point to something they were trying to hide in the first place. Perhaps a Heretic King that they were like, yeah, let's just not even write him down anymore. Let's just leave that guy out, Who was William Howard Taft? You just leave him out, which is not a correct way of doing things. And so, ta-da, we end up with nowadays having him just stand out, everything about him too, his art and everything. But really, they were worshiping a sun disk and a flying sun disk. So were the people of Mithra. So you see the exact same thing in the Sumerians and so on. You see this depiction all the way through the area. You see sphinxes and things. You see androgynous creatures at the gates, and symbolically meaning certain things, going all the way back to animal aspect worship from whenever we were not even a sentient people that we would consider it today. Although I guarantee if you asked them at the time, they would have felt they much, much were, more than all the other people that they knew of. and they continued it on through this time here. Let's see if we can finish this off.
It is believed, however, that in order to protect his remains, Akenaten's followers removed his body from its tomb at Amarna.
It was an Egyptian custom to gather together and to try to hide and conceal and protect for the future the remains of important pharaohs and burials. And I think there's a strong possibility that that's what did happen, and it remains to be discovered for archaeologists in the future.
It's possible we'll find him in some other cache, because we've found quite a few in other caches. In fact, the beautiful lady that we thought was Nefertiti and so on ends up being actually Akhenaten, ends up being King Tut's mom, but yet not Nefertiti, and so on. If you look into it, it goes into a bunch of things. Anyhow, I don't know if we'll ever find him or not. The strange and stupid thing is all those mummies that were coming out during the 17 and 1800s out of there, that people just passed off and ditched around and crushed up and made shit out of, and stupid things. Wonder if that happens to go where some of these famous people go because nobody knew, and the people selling them off didn't even care, and stuff. It just didn't really matter to them at all. Again, we're going to see one of those fertility statues that are painted stark dead black. But if you'll look, he's got a little beer belly going on, and then his facial depiction does look a little more like the depiction they show of King Tut being his father and so on, rather than that elongated horse face. So we're not sure without the body if he doesn't have a horse face or not.
With the heretic Akenaten dead, Egypt prayed for a strong pharaoh to restore its faith and reassure its people. Instead, this burden fell upon a boy just 10 years old.
And there's King Tut. So that leads into the next part of this that they go on to, and they go into King Tut and Tutankhamun and whether or not he was killed and the things like that. I think we've worked this out way since then. This was well produced 15 years ago, but not so fantastic for today, I guess you'd say. But I'm more like that old school style like this too. It really draws you in. Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe and enjoy. But the tales of Akenaten that were never supposed to be told. Yet, it's one of the guys we've really kept up with, huh? Peace.